Hello and welcome to The Stack. On today's show, I speak with Corey Stokes from celebrated Essence, a title first published in 1970, and it is self-described as a black women's lifestyle guide. Also on the show, a preview of the most recent iteration of the Monocle Companion, and the future of Singapore's most beloved newsstand. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show talking about Essence, a title founded in 1970, written for African American women. At the time, an overlooked demographic in the world of magazines. Still going strong, I really enjoyed their May-June issue. It was a pleasure talking with Corey Stokes, Senior Vice President Creative for the magazine. Corey Stokes, welcome to The Stack. What a pleasure to have you here because I've been in love with your magazine recently, Essence. But Corey, before you talk about your experience at Essence since when you started at the magazine, let's talk about, it's an iconic title, right? It's been going on since 1970, and at the time, there was not much in terms of magazines for black women, right?
No, there was none. When Essence launched, there were magazines that were publications that were starting to cater towards women in general, right? But in 1970s, right, you can only imagine how different the living experiences were for Black women versus, other women. And so 5 men actually came up with the idea to create Essence. One being Ed Lewis, who was the founder who stuck around the longest and helped kind of like usher Essence into what it is today. Definitely saw that opportunity, saw that need for a place where Black women could feel safe, could feel seen. And it's a beauty to see that intention and that mission to serve Black women deeply, right? That was the tagline when the brand first launched, and it's something that we've kind of kept, right? We don't necessarily put it on the top of our masthead like we used to, right? But it's still a core piece of our mission, and it's what all of our work is rooted in and guided by.
And the brand expanded a lot. Of course, I have a copy of your beautiful printed edition, but when you think of Essence, you guys have so many kind of festivals, events, and I think that plays a very important role to the brand as well, right?
Yeah, experiential, to be honest, saved this brand, right? And I think a lot of us would admit that and exclaim that, right? When we looked, when Essence Festival of Culture, which is what it's titled now, first launched 30 years ago, right? We're literally celebrating its 30-year anniversary this year in New Orleans. It was launched just to celebrate the brand reaching 25 years, right? It was like, how do we celebrate this in a really big way? And they thought to just have a concert in New Orleans. And that idea of just celebrating their anniversary turned into what we now call Essence Festival Culture, because we know that it's not just about the music, right? We get the amazing artists like the Janet Jacksons, like the Megan Thee Stallions, like the Missy Elliott's, right? Like the Lauryn Hills, all coming to perform. But we also know is that it's a place where our community can just come and enjoy themselves and love on one another. So it's exciting to see how it's grown today to not just be a music festival, but to also be this place where food, culture, fashion all come together. And, as I say, it saved this business when the pandemic hit and, we needed a way to kind of virtually still connect with our community and we couldn't do a live festival. We were able to shift to, digital and still put on a really great experience that brought our community together and connected in a real way. We've coined this term, phygital now, which is how we approach all of our experiences, where we make sure that we not only make space for the individuals that are on the ground, but how do we convert that excitement and that energy to the folks across the world who can enjoy it. So I'm really excited for what the festival is doing. And then all of our other entities, Black Women in Hollywood, which We just celebrated 16 years, which is really creating a space for Black women in Hollywood, literally, but the women in the industry who are more often overlooked by their peers and by the powers to be, right? And so we've created this space. This year, we honored Halle Bailey for her work in The Little Mermaid, Danielle Brooks, Catherine Busby, who's an executive on Stars. So it's just really exciting to note that, we're not just a publication in the literal sense with the magazine, but we also are really looking to play a role into the everyday lives of our community.
Well, but talking about the publication, one thing I have to ask, I know that perhaps in your previous jobs, and maybe still today, I feel that you're a very visual person because the covers for Essence, I mean, they've been amazing. Of course, you have the iconic one of Beyonce, but the most recent one, May, June, which is the man's issue. I mean, when I saw in the newsstand in Miami with Danzan Idris on the cover, I mean, it's fantastic. It's sexy. It's eye-catching, and that's quite rare, I have to say, in certain magazines these days. Tell us about that visual aspect, because you're very visual, right? You're a stylist as well.
Yeah. So, just to give a bit of a backstory, my background is in fashion. I started off as a fashion assistant at Complex Magazine. I did a stint there. Most recently, before Essence, I was a fashion director at Heist, which is a magazine based in Berlin and New York. And I think a lot of stylists or fashion editors will attest to, the role of a stylist or of a fashion editor to the everyday person. It feels like, oh, you're just focusing on fashion, but it does become a situation where you're considering the entire picture, right? Like you have a hand in what the makeup looks like, even what the photography looks like, right? It's a partnership between you and the photographer. And so I knew once I was ready to leave Heist and Bayady, I wanted my next role to be something that considered the entire picture, right? And the entire visual and how that came to life. And coming to Essence and doing my study and my research on the history of the brand, we, discovered that Gordon Parks was the brand's first ever editorial director who shaped what Essence looked like back in the 1970s. And that was a time when we didn't have celebrities on the cover of Essence, right? It was really everyday people, but those covers are probably the most circulated and the most recognizable Essence covers to this day, right? And a lot of the work that we've done in the past year, specifically the past few months, in terms of this new creative refresh that we've called it, in terms of putting more emphasis on photography, making sure that original photography shows up not just on the cover, but inside the entire issue. And then how does text and art work alongside photo and not necessarily against it, right? And so a lot of the visual direction that we've started to really focus and hone in on is in the spirit of Gordon Parks, putting emphasis on original photography, a bit of docu style, but how do we draw someone in to an image just by the cover, right? And so that's something that we've also talked about. These covers, honestly, are probably like the most pulled back that you will get from an image of Essence, right? What I want to convey is, obviously we want to shoot some amazing fashions, right? Dempsey looks amazing in that Versace suit. But what I really want to convey is the beauty of the face, right? And really getting some tight, beautiful portraits. You see that in the Beyonce image. And I think that was the kind of like start, right? The signifier of the shift of what you'll come to see with Essence.
And there must be a lot of respect among those big names in the community, to be part of Essence, because let's be honest, Beyonce, I'm sure she wouldn't accept to be on the cover of quite a few titles, but I have a feeling for Essence, for her, maybe it was a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a beautiful making, right? I think what makes being at Essence so important is we're not just a fashion magazine, but we're a magazine with a purpose, right? And a community that is not just kind of like fans of something, right? But they're really they're really invested and they feel like this brand is a part of their life, right? And when you think of someone as big as Beyonce and she's looking to introduce a new brand that she understands, and and she and her team understands the importance of where that is placed, the intention behind the brand sacred, and how does that show up, right? And I think, I'm grateful that they saw the beauty in coming to a brand like Essence to tell that story, because the sacred brand is not just for Black women, right? But it's definitely built in the spirit of Black women. It's created by Black women. It's considering Black women at the start. And so to come to Essence and feel safe enough to tell that story with us, is the ultimate gift. And so I'm very grateful that, she and the Parkwood team and the Sacred team saw the benefit in that.
And you're very right. I mean, it's not just fashion or celebrity. I mean, even in the latest issue, there's been some great articles. For example, one I love, I think, was about kind of Black home ownership in the United States. Super interesting topic. So I think the magazine maybe is also not scared to be political when it's needed, right?
Not at all. Not at all. I think what we know to be true is there are a lot of places where they won't tell us the truth, right? And so we want to make sure that we're creating a space to have those tough conversations with our community, letting them know what exactly is happening in the world and how that affects our community, right? And so that story on Black home ownership is one of my favorites. I enjoy that kind of reporting just personally, but it's also something that we as a brand value.
I am curious about something from the United States in general when it comes to magazines, because I know a lot of kiosks and newsstands have closed down. So how does you work with Essence? Do you guys depend a lot on subscription numbers, perhaps? And I'm talking about the print title. Or you still sell, quite a lot of copies in the CVSs or independent bookstores, or how is it going in that sense?
I am proud to say that we have seen an uptake in subscribers over the past year. A bit of that is just considering some new strategies in terms of how do we make this publication more of a collectible, right? We already understand that it's looked at as a bit of a staple in Black households, right? But how do we make sure that we individuals don't necessarily how do we make it so that individuals don't need to go out and get it? But how do we make it so that they want to sign up, subscribe, so that we deliver it directly to their doorstep, right? And I think a bit of that is considering this subscription cover model where, if you're a subscriber of Essence, you get a special cover, right? And this isn't a new concept. I think, we've seen brands do this often, but what we see is that it's actually working in terms of, our audience really enjoying the idea of, as a subscriber, you get something special that other individuals don't get, right? And so we saw it work well. I would say my first time actually doing it was when we had Angela Bassett on the cover. We illustrated her as a comic book, and this was to promote Wakanda Forever, the movie. And so we illustrated Angela Bassett, and then the subscribers cover it looked like a page of a comic book. We saw the response to that being really highly received. And so something that we continue to toy around with and play with. But what we will say is that we've seen, just also by social sentiment, our audience and our readers really enjoying the subscribers only approach.
And finally, I just want to add here, don't ever remove the horoscope. It's a very good one. I really like it.
I love it as well. I will shout out Grace White on our print team. She leads that. And, every so often we go through the magazine and look at what we want to update, what do we want to shift. And every time we come to the horoscopes, I think it's unanimous and that we should keep it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Yeah, we will not. We will not.
What are you, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
I'm a Cancer. And the May horoscope for Cancer is extremely spot on.
Thank you very much, Corey. And the May-June issue of Essence is out now.
The Menu, bringing you Monocle's recipe for the best in drinking and dining. We make entertaining a doddle.
It's incredibly easy to make.
With expert opinions,
You can use fish fillets, which you grill in the oven or pan fry.
a bit of seasoning,
Lots of lime, a lot of cracked pepper, and a bit of good olive oil.
and plenty of spice,
And then you cook it in caraway and 7 spice.
as well as something sweet.
Then you take a big pot of mascarpone and spoon it into your egg yolk.
And maybe even a little bit nuts.
You take it out, you top it with some pine nuts, and you're good to go.
It's a recipe that's guaranteed to impress.
It's slightly controversial, but it's the one thing that has surprised the most people when they eat it.
Premiering live every Friday at 2000 London time, midday in Los Angeles, or downloadable wherever you get your podcasts.
And now I have some sad news from Singapore. The beloved Thambi magazine store, which even won last year's Monocle Retail Awards for Asia's top print media outlet, closed down. Monocle's Naomi Shu Elegant tell us a bit more about the importance of Thambi and review what's next for the shop and its owner, San Thambi. Naomi Shu Elegant, welcome to The Stack. Always great to have you here on the show. But this time it's a little bit of a sad story. I mean, the reason I'm talking to you is the iconic Thambi magazine store in Singapore closed down. And to remind our listeners, you won the Asia's top print media outlet in our Monocle Retail Awards. First of all, describe the place and the importance for Singaporeans.
Yeah, so it's a really special store. There's a reason that we gave it the award, right? It opened in the 1940s. The current owner is actually the third generation. So it was his grandfather and then his father. It's located in Holland Village, which is a little neighborhood in Singapore. And when you walk around the corner to the store, you can already see it from far away because it would have this very iconic kind of tunnel of magazines on the pavement that almost shades passerby. And then when you walk in, there's like no door. It just is there. So it's like very open to the rest of the neighborhood. And yeah, there's a reason it became so iconic over the years.
And from what I could see, you could browse around freely, and there were like 1,000 titles. So there was a lot in that shop, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the range was incredible. You'd have, Monocle and other monthlies and glossies. You'd have newspapers from all around the world, local newspapers, obviously, but then also like really technical periodicals. Like I remember seeing 2 or 3 different stamp collecting magazines or, and like computer coding and like, so anyone with any kind of extremely niche hobby that they want to pick up could also go there to find something and they would find it. And I think that was also part of the appeal and something that the owner really always wanted to keep. He didn't want to sacrifice, any kind of niche topic for a bigger seller. He wanted to have the whole range.
And before we talk about the future, because I know you've been in touch with the owner, San Thambi, why? Why did it close down?
So I think it's not totally clear. The owners haven't chosen to share the full story of what happened yet, but from what he's told news outlets, it sounds like possibly the landlord or someone said that he had to have the display, which I assume would mean that tunnel that I was talking about, because it does, come on the pavement. And rather than, having to get rid of that and kind of retreat into the store, he decided to close down, which I totally understand because I think it really is part of the magic of the store that you have this kind of like larger than life display, very interactive. And that's why people loved it,
And maybe we shouldn't be too sad because, as I said, you've been talking to San, the owner. Is there a future, perhaps, for a relocation? Can we be a little bit optimistic?
Yeah, so we were just talking on WhatsApp today a little bit. The store only closed a couple of days ago, so it's really very fresh for the whole family. But I do think that they are looking for a new space. They want to stay in Holland Village for sure, because I think the legacy of that neighborhood is so important. And it is very much a neighborhood store, so he doesn't want to just go somewhere else in Singapore. And actually, the Singaporean Minister of Education was walking around with Sam in Holland Village the other day, looking for any retail spaces. On the last day of the store, so many people came out to say goodbye and to just support. And it was like very emotional. And I think that really showed how important it is to the community and that we just can't let the store go.
And Naomi, now we're hoping that Thambi relocates somewhere and maybe it could be even a nicer space. Who knows? How does that leave the Singaporean when Singaporeans want to buy a magazine? How is Singapore when it comes to that? Because in many countries we see the closure of kiosks. Do you still think Singapore has a variety of spaces where you can buy magazines or the local newspapers? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think Thambi was really famous because it was quite unique in Singapore. There's a lot of your classic retail, like bigger chain bookstores, some independent bookstores, not too many news kiosks. And I think a lot of online shopping, things like that, or, 7-Eleven for your newspapers. But in terms of magazine stores, there weren't really that many. Another nice place is Bashir Graphic Books, which does a lot of art books, but also some more art and design periodicals. That's a very, very nice location. But yeah, Thambi was really one of the very few, which is why I think it's hit so hard and why people are very excited for the prospect of it reopening.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and I very much wish that Thambi reopens in another location and continue with its usual charm and incredible selection of titles. Viva the newsstand.
Funny how many people get these things wrong. I go into a lot of jazz clubs and I go, what made you build it like this?
Everyone's got an opinion about design these days. Join us on a journey to cut through the noise as we sit down with some of the design greats.
It's possible to really improve how we live and how we work through design.
We also have you covered on everything from architecture to product design to fonts and fashion too.
She has her own signature and creates beautiful and also comfortable clothes that women can really spend their days in.
Make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 2000 London time for Monocle's weekly design show, Monocle on Design. Or find it wherever you get your podcasts.
And talking about newsstands, coming up here on The Stack is an ode to the kiosk. This week, Monocle celebrates the release of the 4th of our Monocle Companion series with 50 incredible essays, which this time look at ideas for building better cities. One of the essays, by Monocle's design correspondent Stella Roos, is about how kiosks are the vital ingredient in bringing a community together.
One summer about 10 years ago, the sleepy Helsinki suburb I grew up in transformed overnight into the city's hippest neighborhood. For most of my life, the quaint wooden villas and communal gardens of Käpylä offered little for teenagers to do beyond aimless visits to the supermarket. That was until a group of young entrepreneurs laid their eyes on the abandoned yellow kiosk that stood lonely in the main square. They decided to open up the shutters, set out a few scraggly chairs, and start serving cinnamon buns and coffee. Soon, the park was hosting spontaneous flea markets and live concerts centered around this thriving small business. The kiosk's success boiled down to nostalgia. Everyone in Helsinki of a certain generation has childhood memories of buying nekku, a traditional kind of fudge lollipop, from their local lippakioski. The kiosk's nickname translates roughly as cap kiosk and comes from its long upturned awning that looks a little like a baseball cap. The first had been designed in the 1920s by Gunnar Taucher, Helsinki's city architect, and were added to the streetscape up until the 1950s. At about the same time in Berlin, German couple Anne-Marie and Martin von Löw embarked on a far more ambitious kiosk rescue mission. On a trip to Poland, they had found and fallen in love with the K67, a 1960s kiosk that can be spotted in various states of disrepair around Eastern Europe. They tracked down its designer, the Slovenian architect Saša Mehtig, and with his help found an out-of-use K67, shipped it over to Berlin, restored it, and reopened it as a cafe in a Kreuzberg courtyard. Today, the couple runs the cafe, as well as a side business sourcing and renovating old kiosks, lending them to the likes of Bottega Veneta for pop-up events. The yellow booth works like a beam of sunshine in Berlin and must have had an even stronger effect when it landed in 1960s Yugoslavia. Mehtig was just 25 in 1966 when he came up with a square modular booth that can be linked to others. The K67s proliferated across Yugoslavia, making any kind of commercial activity possible within a standardized shell. Perfect for a young country trying to get used to communism. Compare kiosks of different nationalities, and it becomes clear that almost by accident, they end up condensing the best qualities of the places they belong to. That applies to their design as well as to their contents. The word kiosk originates from kushk, Turkish for a small open-air pavilion. And still today, the kiosk offers something you could do without, but would prefer not to. That turns out to vary from city to city. In Helsinki, kiosks were always heavy on sweets. Go to Rome and the edicole are stacked densely with newspapers. Lisbon and the kiosque are spots for a drink and some salgados. Or Athens, and you'll find that the periptera are all about cigarettes. In Helsinki, many lippakioski are still abandoned, and no wonder. The city requires new tenants to foot the bill for renovations, despite the municipality being the operation that allowed them to deteriorate in the first place. Fixing them up would be a small investment that would strengthen the city's character. In Capula, when the lippakioski tenants ran into financial trouble, the neighborhood responded with a crowdfunding campaign. Last summer, the kiosk reopened with a new trio of entrepreneurs, and on the first day, the queue stretched across the square. A kiosk might deal in small change, but it adds up to a precious public good. For Monocle in Berlin, this is Stella Roos.
Thank you, Stella. And to read the other 49 essays, you can buy the latest Monocle Companion on monocle.com. And did I say that it comes with a lovely baby blue cover? And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor, Jack Jewers. If you have any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. We'll be back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. And meanwhile, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.